States. And this project will be given by, it was put together by 28 participants from 15 different countries. And basically the essence is to give guidance on how countries can get engaged in the space industry. So with that, we'll start the team project presentation.
Space, I think, is like an area of possibility.
Space, for me, it means a lot. It means freedom.
I think it does make you more, to look at others more kindly and to realize that life is exceedingly important.
Now I see space as an enabler. It's another tool, it's an asset that we have.
For healthcare, for food and safe water, for security, for planning and industry and growth, for transport. So space has a role in all of those.
Really, it's not about the space per se, it's about the kinds of goals and vision they have for the next generation in their country.
The Philippines is being hit by like 20 typhoons each year.
Brazil needs a space application.
They need to know is that this is going to create jobs. That is one of the most important things in Latin America.
So we are now venturing to space technology to aid the existing technology that we have, and then hopefully we could really minimize the losses.
In space, there's often a key role for government because a number of space services and space investments are generally public services. We think about the key services that come from weather monitoring as well as disaster response.
They focus on the downstream part because that's where you can really show your citizens that by investing in space you can bring them benefits.
This is not just a science fiction thing, and actually people all around the world can work together and cooperate and make projects and things which are successful.
As I think about the future of humans in space, really I'm interested in the future of Earth. But I think that our future on Earth hopefully will be informed and improved by our activities and our work in space.
It's a really exciting time, I think.
Space for all humankind, space for humanity, space for better life, So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
The global space industry is growing quickly, changing the way our world works. Barriers to engaging into space activities are lower than ever before, allowing the emergence of new space nations.
This afternoon, we will present the work completed by 28 professional participants from 15 different nationalities of the 30th Space Studies Programme. This week, this project was completed over 9 weeks, beginning on the 26th of June this year, and set about developing guidance for emerging space states and how to derive benefit for society and economy. Deputy Head of Mission of Hungary, Mr. János Magdo.
President of the International Institute of Space Law, Professor Karl Schrögl. President of the International Space University, Professor Walter Peters, Vice President of the International Space University, Steve Brody, Executive Director of the Space Studies Program, Dr. Omar Hatale, Ssp17 staff and participants.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Aress presentation. Our mission statement was to identify recommendations for emerging space states that will inspire and enhance social and economic growth. The space sector itself traditionally comprises of the government and commercial sectors. Historically speaking, the government sectors have dominated the market, with big players such as NASA, ESA, Roscosmos setting the big agendas and driving humanity into space. However, now 76% of the global space economy, worth an estimated $330 billion belongs to the commercial sector. The value of this economy has been rising 4% year on year since 2005. New applications are part of the economy now as it spreads into areas such as agriculture, search and rescue, mining, Earth observation, and many more that you will hear about over the next hour.
And the economical perspective is not the only rationale for investing into space. Investing into space can mean many things. It can mean boosting your technological innovations, increasing your presence on the international scene, or inspiring your young nations. Your investment today is your investment in tomorrow's legacy. It will be the input of your nations that will help humanity protect our planet, push our boundaries, and eventually extend our presence beyond Earth.
So at the start of this project, we had an enormous task we had to face, and that was to gather the evidence required to build a general roadmap that could be applied to any nation wishing to embark upon its space adventure. We began this process by applying a space participation metric to a wide range of countries spanning the globe, and we deciphered 13 countries from every continent and from a wide variety of economic and socio-economic backgrounds.
To represent the evidence gathering part of our project, two Aress representatives, Victoria and Moena, will now travel the world to meet with 3 delegates from 3 established space nations. Our first stop is Norway.
To speak with us about our report for emerging space states. Could you tell us how did Norway get involved in space?
Well, Norway's actually been involved in space for a while, and it really started with early aurora research and creating of synthetic northern lights. And those type of research activities really drove our early space activities. And that was the reason why we built our first rocket range in the early 60s, and finally becoming a proper space station when we launched our first rocket into space in 1962.
What were the challenges when entering the space sectors?
Well, being a small country, at least in Norway's case, you can really become resource constrained if you spread yourself really thinly. So in our experiences, we're very helpful to focus on some key areas to build your activities around. And for Norway, it's very natural to then start building it around the aurora and space weather research. In the late 80s, of course, we became a member of ESA as well, so we could take part in more international, larger projects. But even as an ESA member, we decided to really focus on some core areas So Norway hasn't really been involved that much in human spaceflight, for example, but instead invested heavily in communication, navigation, and other downstream applications.
How do you justify spending money on space activities?
Well, it's one of the good ways, I think, to do this is to show people what actually space can give them. And one of those things you need to do is then show that human spaceflight is not the only game. It's a very inspirational game, but space encompasses so much more. And it's really the backbone, a lot of the technology we use in our everyday life. So when we created our space office, we really set out to create some clear visions and goals. And yes, we wanted to create a private industry, but we really wanted to focus on space applications for public good.
But Norway is located far away from the equator. How come a country like Norway be interested in satellite?
Well, it's true that a lot of countries around the equators can really take advantage of geosynchronous satellites. But you now have another set of satellites as well in polar orbit, which basically means that it's passing the North Pole every time. And the further north you are, the more contact time you can have with the satellites. So for Norway's case, being in the far north, it was natural to start building ground infrastructure for contacting polar orbiting satellites. So we start building ground stations as far as 79 degrees north.
Thank you very much for your insights. Tusen tack.
Tusen tack.
Moana, have you known before that Norway makes use of its very special location high in the north?
I didn't, and I think it's interesting to know that Norway went from mainly doing research and then doing the international cooperation these days.
I will hand on this information to our team.
Good thinking.
Moana, what do you think about going to China next?
Good thinking. I heard Chinese space sector developed these quickly these days.
Ni hao.
Ni hao.
Ni hao.
Thank you for taking your time today to talk with us. First of all, could you tell us why your country is pursuing space activities?
Okay, for China, there are many rationales of engaging in space activities. The pragmatic ones are fulfilling the demands of the scientific and the technological and the economical development, improving the national security, scientific, cultural levels of the Chinese people, and developing the overall industry strength for our country.
Could you tell us something about the recent achievement in Chinese space sector?
In the recent 60 years, we have found a way of self-reliance and independent innovation. Since 2011, the space sector in China has remarkable progress. Many programs such as Shenzhou spaceship, Chang'e lunar exploration, Beidou navigation systems, and the high-resolution Earth observation satellites has been successfully accomplished. China has a capability in manufacturing fixed and mobile satellite systems, and the Chinese satellite fleets are providing satellite communication services in China as well as many areas in the world.
How did the national policy evolve?
The Chinese government has supportive policies and regulations for space sector, provides a favorable environment for sustainable and quick development. Space activities are well arranged. Major projects and programs are given priority to promote the capability of entering and utilizing space, as well as ensuring the space security. And the roles of various players in space sector, such as government, universities, specialized contractors, and the service providers, are clearly defined by the effective coordination.
And what about the legal system?
A legal system has been established to govern the space activities, such as space data application management, the control of the export, and technology transfer. And the Chinese government also attaches great importance to the resources for the space sector. For example, China made a lot of efforts in obtaining the spectrum and orbital resources for its space activities.
How do you improve public support and public awareness for space activities?
Events like China Space Day, World Space Week, and Science and Technology Week are used to promote the culture about space and the spirit of the space exploration to attract the public interest in space.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
You're welcome. I hope our experience could be of help to the emerging space states.
谢谢。
谢谢。
不客气。
That was a really valuable talk for us.
It was.
And especially that China is focusing on independent space innovations.
True. And the government has a very strong supportive policies and regulations. I think it's really interesting.
Why not? I think we should go to India next.
Sounds great.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for being here with us today
Thank
and
you.
sharing your insights.
Welcome to India.
Thank you.
In what way is India's space program unique, and can you tell us a bit about the benefits?
Yeah. The Indian Space Research Organization started in 1963 with an aim of bringing space science to common man's benefit. And it is unique because it is application-centric mainly and people-centric and also self-reliant. One of the initial experiments we did called SITE, that is a satellite instructional television experiment, which was covering 2,400 remote villages of India, is one of the equivalent of today's DTH. That was the forerunner for our communication side applications. Now we have a host of space applications from Earth observation, remote sensing, our own navigations, geospatial platforms. And not only that, to become self-reliant, we have parallelly developed our own launch vehicle technologies, which can take our satellites to orbit in such a way that we can become self-reliant. Thus, we are bringing to our best the complete space application benefits to the common man.
How do you justify spending taxpayers' money for space sectors in a developing country?
Actually, it's easy for me to answer because this was the question which was asked to our founder, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, when he started this organization. Quoting his words, he said, "To play a meaningful role in nationally and in the community of nations, we should be second to none in applying advanced science and technology to the common man's benefit." That was the rationale on which ISRO was set up. The government accepted this rationale, and through years of work, ISRO has proved to the country that it worked, and the people have accepted that fully.
Was there a shift from your initial policy of simply helping the society to commercial launches and space exploration?
No, absolutely not. There is no shift. The focus is very unique, and it is to benefit the common man. See, coming to the economic aspect, I can statistically tell every 1 rupee Indian citizens spend on the Indian space program, we are able to give them a return of around 1.5 rupees. And it's not only economic return. The amount of industrial setup which it can develop, highly skilled labor force, the human resources it develops, its application towards STEM education, and the motivation, inspiration, that's all plays a major role. It's not purely the economic benefit, and of course the national prestige. And telling about the commercial launches, see, whenever we have an extra capacity in our launch vehicles or our satellite transponders, we go for the commercial thing. A typical example is recently the record of 104 satellites being launched by the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. In that, the main payload was Indian satellite, and there was capacity to include nano satellites and small satellites. So we put the co-passengers as 103 satellites, and we planned the mission accordingly. So whenever we get such an opportunity to, without affecting our priority and schedules, we go for commercial activities. Nevertheless, India is not the same India when it was started in 1963. We have grown economically very strong, and we have a highly skilled human resources now, good infrastructure. So I certainly feel the policy has to be judiciously reviewed and made in a manner which is good for the nation for the time.
So could you tell us about the recent activities in space sector in India?
Yeah, of course, the activities in the space sector in India is broadly into two classifications. One is the launch vehicle area. In that, we have operational launch vehicles like the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, which can take 1 or 2 tons to LEO orbit, and GSLV and GSLV Mark III, which can take 2 tons and 4 tons respectively to GTO orbits. We are improving upon the propulsion system, and also a demonstration of reusable launch vehicle was tried to bring down the cost of space to access space. And now the main task is our demand is very high, basically. Even with increased launch from 2 years per launch to 5 years, we increased, is not able to still meet the country's demand. So we are looking for around 12 launches per year. And it is very difficult to achieve with our human resources in-house. So we are planning to make an industrial consortium which can make end-to-end PSLV and launch it from Sriharikota, that is on the road. And another activity which we have just started, not in our priority, is the human space program. With available pre-budget, we have done some initial critical experiments. And once the country decides to go ahead and makes the funds available, we will pursue that further.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk with you today. Shukriyan.
Shukriya. Thank you.
Moana, that was another really useful talk for our report.
It was.
I was really fascinated that India has such flexible policies that can be adapted to its needs.
True. And now it reaches to the industry, and raising a public awareness I think it's really interesting and important to include our final report.
Moana, I think we should go back to Ireland to our team and finish our report.
Good thinking. Let's go back.
Having traveled the world in search of established space sectors with valuable lessons to be shared, the Aress representatives evaluated each country's policies, geographic contexts, and of course, their space sector landscapes. From that, an evidence-based roadmap for these emerging space states is prepared. Some proved more successful than others, of which the roadmap was created, stretching far and long. For emerging countries starting on this journey, the rewards will significantly improve their economy, capability, and cultural inspiration in the space sector. Their future lies in leading to increased STEM and STEAM education, ultimately generating a pipeline of qualified professionals.
The aim at this point was to derive general recommendations based on evidence that could then be transformed by each nation into a set of useful recommendations that could be applied to enhance and inspire their social and economic circumstances. The added value from this project is that we have a wide group of people to take this document back to their home nation after SSP17 and attempt to implement this at the national level, making use of many of the recommendations that you will see in the report.
We invite on stage Ali from Oman, Istvan from Hungary, Kira from Ireland, Brian from the Philippines, and Roberto from Peru. The 5 delegates now have the executive summary in their hands. At first, they seem a bit skeptical.
Thank you for your report. But before reading this, I would like to ask a very obvious but a very important question, like, is it science fiction or not?
You mean the space?
Yes.
So you're kind of being skeptical about being into the space sector. Well, there are a lot of reasons and rationales in space sector, such as socio-economic growth, and it enhances their national prestige, and the technology can be used for the national security. And it creates a basis for space commercialization, and also it improves research and development.
Okay. We have many problems in our country. Why bother with space investments?
Space can actually help you solve all these problems. There are the typical space applications such as satellite communication, navigation, and remote sensing. And you can use disaster management and mapping and location services to solve your problems. And space also creates jobs and spin-off technologies. That means that innovations that were made for space can be used in other industries, such as solar panels.
I didn't understand. So if a small country wants to venture into space, does it have to have a launching facility?
You do not need to have a launching facility or launching vehicle. There are so many other opportunities. You could be a part of the upstream sector by being a supplier of the component, or you could make use of the downstream sector by providing space-related technologies and services.
And so what are the economic benefits of space?
The space sector is a growing market. It grows in average about 4% each year, and it also brings back money. For each euro or dollar you invest, you get 3 back.
Okay. So how do we develop our space sector?
Well, especially through educations and training, such as STEAM educations, or you can try out some international cooperations. There's the best example is the International Space Stations, ISS, but there are lots of regional cooperation. For example, in Asia, there are many space-related forums, and you can find a lot of opportunities of space cooperation, such as APRSAF, which stands for Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum.
So how can we compete with countries that are already established in the space sector?
You don't need to compete. You first need to look at your strengths, the strengths of your country, and then identify space opportunities. The space sector is really a huge market, and you can find niches. You just have to identify your niche.
Thank you very much for your answers. I think all of us is interested in developing our space sector, so we will read this.
Masa al Khair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ali. I am from Oman. Working in the Aress project helped me understand how to link a country's objectives, rationales, and strength to the space sector and exploit its opportunities, various opportunities in the space sector that will help in overcoming the difficulties in the country. There are many opportunities that I have found. Of course, as a country like Oman is rich of oil and gas, and the oil industry have developed capabilities in Oman. Before going to that, the oil industry, as you know, the oil prices have gone down. And this created a financial situation in Oman, and budget have been cut, job opportunity have been reduced, and we have many problems in the private sector. So the country is looking for diversifying the economy. And one of the opportunities that I have found, it's quite interesting because the oil industry have developed the capabilities in Oman, and the technologies used from the oil and gas industry can be used as a spin-in for future space markets, such as space mining. So for one of the first recommendation that I will take with me in Oman is to establish a government space agency. This space agency or office will be responsible of coordinating the stakeholders in Oman and help in space, building capacity in space. This also should encourage the forming policies and strategies that will help and encourage the space sector to do space activities in the country. It should allow the collaboration between the space market in the country and international space companies. It also help in the education, help in capacity, and also encourage or introduce space-related subjects in engineering and science departments. So for me, Aress project helped me a lot, and during research I have come with many recommendations. These are only a few of them. So when I go back to Oman, I will help my country to enter to space. Thank you very much.
Hello. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian, and I'm from the Philippines. A few years back, myself, together with other Filipino engineers, went to Japan with the goal of developing our first Philippine satellite called Diwata-1. It was a momentous event not only for me, but for the whole country as well, because we have proven that a small nation as the Philippines can venture into space projects. On April 27, 2016, we were at Tsukuba Space Center in Japan, waving proudly our Philippine flags as we witnessed our satellite being released from ISS. And from that moment on, we can truly say that we have our own eye in the sky. But if you would wonder, why would such a small country as the Philippines venture into space projects? Well, the primary reason is our country is being hit by typhoons 15 to 20 a year, and 7 to 9 of them making landfall. Some of them very destructive, and all of them is a sad reality that we can't escape. So, as a government initiative, we look to space for solution. And through remote sensing, images from the satellites are used for risk reduction and mitigation, post-disaster analysis, resource assessment, and climate change study, to name a few. So, working for this Aress project is really very insightful to me personally. As a person working directly with the space sector back in my country, I have a chance to talk to experts, study about emerging countries on how they structure the space programs. It has given me a better perspective on where the Philippines is and where it wants to go in the future in terms of its space programs. So with this Aress document here in my hand, we have 3 recommendations for our country. First, although we have a vast courses on electronics and engineering and sciences, we don't have space-based courses offered in universities, such as aerospace engineering or cosmosciences. So if we were to develop local space experts in our country, these courses should be established in the universities. Second, the government should have active engagement with the local sector or local industries, one of which is the electronic industry, because right now it's really blooming industry in the Philippines. So through active discussions or forums and a series of talks, they could create partnerships with these industries and then allow these companies to develop and manufacture space-grade components for different space applications. And lastly, since we have already proven that we can develop, we have the capability to develop satellites, in order for the country to have an end-to-end solution in satellite development, it should invest in testing facilities such as vibration test, off-gas test, radiation test, to name a few. And if all these testing facilities will be established in the country, the satellite development would surely flourish. So now, I have this arrest document with me. I go back to my country and continue our space endeavors. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Üdvözlök mindenkit. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is István. I'm from Hungary. And I would like to talk about the Hungarian space sector and the recommendations we made with the Aress project. So before SSP and before Aress project, I didn't know much about the space sector and about the Hungarian space sector. I only knew that we had an astronaut in the 80s, but that's all. But now, after Aress project, I know a lot. For example, Hungary became a new member state of the European Space Agency. And what does it mean for Hungary? More jobs, more funding, more spin-offs, and more participation in international projects. And what is about the public? The public know nothing about this. And this is a problem in Hungary. So our first recommendation for Hungary is to raise the public awareness and the public awareness about the space sector of Hungary. And after the public know that Hungary has a successful industry, because it is successful, just nobody knows it, after that, the government can support more the space sector and invest more. And this is how the government can encourage the private sector in Hungary. So this is our second recommendation for Hungary. So we would like that to improve the private sector in Hungary, to startups and companies come to Hungary and establish these companies there, because they pay tax, of course. And the other thing is that they make jobs. And this is very good opportunity for the Hungarian engineers, for example, because Hungary has a lot of engineers and has a lot of young engineers. And this is our third recommendation, is the government should support more the Hungarian students, especially engineers and from the STEM students, to go abroad and study in foreign countries or here at ISU. So if I will go to back to Hungary, I would like to be participate to develop our country's space sector and to help to improve it, because I feel I can help. I hope they will accept these recommendations. I hope we can convince our decision makers, and I hope Hungarian space sector will be famous. Thank you very much.
Hola, mi nombre es Roberto Uvidia de Perú. Hello, my name is Roberto Uvidia from Peru, a country that has been participating in the space sector for a long time, but hasn't made many improvements in this field. Usually, Peru depends on the technology of other countries for its activities. The principal activities in Peru are agriculture, mining, and tourism. And in Team Aress, we believe that these areas can be greatly improved with the implementation of space technologies. In Peru, we have a space agency named CONIDA. It was established in 1974, and it has been participating actively in the space research especially during the 70s and the 80s with the United States, when two launching facilities, Punta Lobos and Chilca, were created for testing suborbital research rockets. And currently, CONIDA is working on creating more powerful rockets in order to gain access to space to Peru. Also, there has been an increasing interest from the academic sector. There are two Peruvian universities that have already created CubeSats and are working with international institutions to acquire capabilities to create better satellites. One of the recommendations that we want to make to Peru is that they should facilitate the cooperation between the space industry and its principal activities, agriculture, mining, and tourism. This will result in an improvement in the production and will also generate many opportunities for Peruvian citizens to train themselves and to work in jobs related to space within the country. We also want to recommend Peru to expand their activities to hot topics in space research. The desert Pampas de la Joya in Arequipa, Peru, has been recently studied by many Peruvian and international researchers and has been recognized as a Martian analog. This is an opportunity for Peru to provide with facilities for human analog missions and also for rover testing. Also, all this experience that Peru has with mining provides the country with a unique opportunity. They can participate from technological exchange between terrestrial and space mining sectors. Finally, Peru has a geographical location that it's near the equator and also near the South Atlantic anomaly. This makes Peru an interesting place for studies on the magnetic field of Earth. And Peru has been participating in this kind of studies in the past, and we as Team Aress want to encourage Peru to continue in this path, to continue mastering these capabilities they already have, and to gain new capabilities, and in this way, in the future, to become a major player in the space sector. Thank you.
Diagwiv agus Falcharoov. My name is Ciara Backwell and I am from Ireland. As a young child, all I wanted to be was an astronaut. I grew up near the oldest astronomically aligned structure in the world, the 5,000-year-old megalithic tomb at Newgrange. Spending time at Newgrange as a child, I wondered about the Earth's position in the universe and what we could do with space. With little to no conversation in my community about the possibilities of space exploration, I grew up thinking that involvement in the space sector was something not for me. It was simply for people in other countries that have national space programs and activities. And I am sure there are many of you here who share or have shared a similar view to mine. And having almost completed this space studies program, Ireland, I can tell you now, space is something for us. Today, Ireland's strengths are numerous, with one consistent theme shining through: our creativity. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, Ireland was ranked the 7th most innovative country in the world in 2016. Ireland's contributions to today's global space sector are significant within the areas of software and precision engineering, optoelectronics, and advanced materials. We have increased our investment into the European Space Agency to €18 million per annum. However, Ireland is not yet exploiting the full array of opportunities at her disposal. Space has applications that directly support our national ambitions to be internationally competitive in areas such as precision agriculture, marine and maritime logistics, advanced manufacturing, and telecommunications. Ireland has strong space-adjacent industries, including pharmaceutical, biomedical, and data analytics sectors, all of which have applications within upstream and downstream markets. It is with these considerations that Aress have developed a set of recommendations which can help Ireland to take its place on the world space sector, on the world space stage. And they include, firstly, for Ireland to join the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and participate further in space-related international partnerships. Secondly, to further encourage strategically focused private industry to engage in space-related activities that promote Irish technologies, economic growth and societal benefits. And thirdly, to increase investment in space-related STEM education and incentivise space science and engineering programs. So let's take action, make dreams a reality, and empower the people of Ireland to take their place in this most exciting of endeavours. Thank you for your time.
You will find much more. In our reports, you will find 21 recommendations. These recommendations are divided in 4 categories: international cooperation, policies and law, education, and economics. We also indicated the level of effort required to implement them.
The Aress report is intended to be used as a springboard for decision and policy makers. The model can be applied to any nation, emerging or not. It is a general model which captures the rationales, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities that each nation faces. The 7 ISU disciplines of science, policy, economics and law, management and business, applications, engineering, human performance in space, and humanities have all been examined within the scope of this document. And while we did find it difficult to incorporate them into a document entirely about policy, we feel that this is strongly represented at the national level at industry and commercial sectors. Space is no longer about rockets, international space stations, astronauts, spacecraft at the edge of the solar system, or aliens. Most of space is in fact on Earth. It is the education, society, industry, and national cohesion that benefits society. Space is opportunity. Team Aress invites you to make use of this resource, enhance your society, and boost your economy.
We would like to warmly thank our sponsors, the Cork Institute of Technology, the Cork County Council, the Space Foundation Ireland, and then the Black Rock Castle Observatory. Thank you for your attention. We now invite the Aress team on stage for the question and answer session.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for this exciting presentation here. Very fascinating. Just have one question. You highlighted several case studies for emerging space nations and what the benefits and so on. Have you guys thought about maybe exploring what were the potential opportunities by forming strategic alliances between some of these nations to get even stronger at certain cases?
So in one of our recommendations, we didn't look at directly allegiance between the different nations, but we looked at international cooperation where they would help each other out, get involved, send students to universities such as the Philippines, sending students to Japan to obtain knowledge and expertise about building satellites, which they used on Dawata 1. But that was one of our recommendations that we looked at and has been recommended to a number of the emerging space nations.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's open it to the judges.
Yes, thank you. That's it was a very informative insight into the specific countries that were highlighted and how you were able to take a general question and focus in on very specifics. And from the last remarks, I understand that the document will provide a roadmap that goes beyond just those examples. One thing I wonder is in recommendations related to establishing a government-level space agency or space office, if you were able to analyze, assess, or compare what has worked well or not worked well in terms of how much government infrastructure to create. In other words, lessons learned perhaps from others who might say, don't do what we did.
Dylan, you want to take this one? Yes, I'll come to you.
So I would say that so your question is basically you're asking what would the lessons be learned from governments who what have we learned from them and what can we say about them that would for emerging nations? Is that more okay? So I would say that we learned a lot from every single space sector that we studied, and of course the governments. I don't want to mention any in particular, but there were some ones which were really interesting and some which were not so interesting, or not so successful, I might say. I think the best thing for which we've seen would be to have clear rationales. So it's really important that the agency or the government has a really clear rationale, because by having a clear rationale, you know the direction you're going, you know the vision which you have. And we've seen from the case studies that we did and the lit review, when a government agency or when the office doesn't have a clear goal or a clear vision, it gets messy, and then there's other things that they're influenced by. So I would say that the most important thing might be a clear rationales for going into the space sector and why it's beneficial would be a really key thing to have when you're developing a policy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would, first of all, I like your approach of looking what your strengths are and then trying to build up on that one. I think that's the right approach. That was not the right approach. A little bit going, exploring the question that Steve said, I would like not to exclude any country, so I would like to hear from all 5 countries the same answer, hopefully a different answer. Some small countries think that at this moment with privatization and with the new change in new space, it is interesting to have a national space law. So can I ask all the countries which were emerging, Oman, Philippines, and so, what do you think? Do you think there's a chance, there's an interest, or there will be a real blockage to have a national space law in your country? So if every country could answer, that would be very nice. Oman? Pass it down there.
Okay, for a country like Oman, I suppose the best answer is to say it's national pride. National pride is the key driver, and it has to be at the government level that will enter the country into space. The private sector is, it is of course an important factor in the country, but I think the government level as a national pride will drive the country into space.
Would in Peru a space law already be applicable, you think? Peru, next to you.
Excuse me, I didn't hear it well.
Would it be possible, or would it be attractive to have a national Peruvian space law?
Actually, I am not quite sure about this because I haven't talked much with Conida, but I know they are working on this area especially for rocketry, for the rockets that they are developing.
Okay. What about the Philippines?
Okay, to answer that question, actually, I think space law, Philippine space law, is just too far ahead in the future. So what we did with our space, because right now we don't have a space agency yet. What we did is we have this program called the Philippine Microsat program to develop capability. And then after that, we have this another program, a 10-year program, which is called the National Development Space Program. So basically, since right now the space agency is still a bill, it's going to be passed in the Congress. So while waiting for that to continue our space programs, we have this program. So for a space law, I think it's we just wanted to take it one step at a time, just to build capability and then to develop local talent or local experts. And then from there, maybe, that's something that we can look into, but right now it's not a priority.
About our Asia countries, what's the situation in Hungary?
Yes, so the national space, first of all, I would like to bring an example. So for example, Luxembourg, it realized that they can improve their private sector and also the space sector by the national legislation, like the space mining. So it came to force on the 1st of August that act about space mining, and now Luxembourg can improve the private sector by legislation, by supportive legislation. And I think this is a very good example for every country. So I think Hungary has a very strong governmental economy. So maybe the difference can be that the base is maybe the economy is the government, so they can make a supportive legislation about startups, companies, which is supported by the government, not by the banks or VCs, because in Luxembourg the private sector is very strong, but Hungary it's weaker. So maybe the government can be a good base, and to improve maybe making more VCs write tenders for companies and startups. So this is not actually space law, but financial law, and of course it has a connection to the space sector.
Okay. Now, a very entrepreneurial country is Ireland. What about Ireland? Is Ireland, would that not be served by something like Luxembourg is doing?
So I think for Ireland, one of the main, or maybe one of the first benefits of setting up a national space law would actually be showing the public and the private sector that the government are taking or emerging into the space sector seriously, and that they're setting forward these steps and these paths for us to actually take. So I think that would be one of the main benefits initially, that there be some foundation set for us, showing that the government was supporting not only the public but the private as we move forward.
Thank you very much. All very well thought answers. Thank you very much.
I've two questions which come out of your recommendations. You mentioned that when you surveyed some of the countries, they had recommendations for STEM or STEAM education. If you could let me know what they were suggesting that's different from what we currently implement in all the countries that we are here. And secondly, in terms of the public awareness initiatives like World Space Week, what are they doing that are different from the emerging space nations?
So in Ireland anyway, I think they're doing an amazing job with STEM and STEM initiatives, but it's kind of to keep that going and keep it going well. So I know myself that I was the only girl in my class who was interested at all in space, and that kind of trend continued, but now going back and doing outreach programs, there's more girls doing space, getting interested in space and physics and sciences and maths. So Ireland are particularly, I think, doing a great job, but it's to keep that going and keep the drive behind it.
So my question really is, like, in terms of, say, the countries you spoke with, like China and India, what are they doing better than the emerging space nations?
I would like to answer in this way. The STEM education, if you see the total analysis in the world, the growth of the STEM education is slightly declining, basically. So to venture into space explorations and space activities, we should have highly skilled professionals which are built up in the country. For example, in the Indian Space Agency, we have started our own institute for space science and technology, which is a deemed university. Under ISRO, under Department of Space, that university functions. And the graduates are completely, education is completely free. It's all India entrance examination. You get into the examination, clear that, the 4 years continuous course is free. And after that course, you are absorbed into the Department of Space. So they have a guaranteed job with a 10-year bond. So that type of activities will enhance the students, the country, the citizens to venture more into the space activities. So STEM education and creating human resources for any country is very important to meet these goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Thank you guys for your wonderful presentation. As always, I have 2 questions. So my first question is, of all of the recommendations that you mentioned, which one do you think is the most important one? This is one question. And then the second question, I remember Owen did mention that the rationales and the recommendations that you presented are for all countries. I wonder how these recommendations could be applicable for the countries that you do not represent. I mean, for example, is any of these recommendations helpful for countries such as Bangladesh? I'm just giving an example. So go ahead and expand on that. Thank you.
Sure. So I might just address your second question first because I forgot your first question. So the idea with our model that we created was not to create specific recommendations for exactly the purpose or the reason that you've outlined. Our model was more of a system that a country can sit down on top of its own existing policies and circumstances and produce the rationales, opportunities, strengths that are relevant to that country. So you'll see in the primary report, you'll see 2 very distinct chapters. One of which is our general recommendations, which doesn't tie in with any specific country, apart from the evidence gathered throughout the previous phase. And then the second phase is the application of those general recommendations to arrive with specific recommendations that make sense for that country's circumstances. So I hope that addresses your second question. Can you please repeat your first question?
All of the recommendations that you mentioned, which one do you think is the most important one that could be used or be helpful for the majority or even all the countries that you've considered or studied? Thank you.
Sure. So I think this probably sounds trivial, but I think as a group we see this, and it's probably reflected in the application of recommendations chapter. So a very important step, which I think a lot of nationalities may not align with 100%, that might not produce as good a space sector as it could, is not aligning their rationales and opportunities with the establishment of a national space coordination agency. I'm reluctant to say National Space Agency because it sounds bigger than it is, but I think a cell within the government or a party that speaks to the government directly on behalf of the private and public industry in the nation is a very, very important step. And that coordination and feeding into policy and strategy and roadmaps is a really important step that I think is fundamental if you want to really develop your space sector in line with current economy and social circumstances.
I might just add to that that the most important recommendation for any country is going to be different, especially if you look at the example of Luxembourg, for example. Their most important or their highest priority is space mining, which we haven't even reached yet. And then if you think about another country like Philippines, where they have disasters, the really important recommendation for them is disaster relief. So it's totally going to be dependable. There's no, that's the whole, exactly what Owen said, which is it's a general recommendations that can be applied to multiple different unique countries and their unique strengths and weaknesses.
Thanks, guys. Fantastic presentation. It follows a bit on from the last question. Do you think it is a necessity that a country who wants to get involved in space has a national space agency or space office on a governmental level? And how does one go about making that happen as ordinary citizens or as space-loving people? Do you have any recommendations on that?
Is that the end? Can I trade it off there? So, oh wait, back. Oh yeah, okay, Jonathan. Yeah, okay. So we think, well, first of all, we'd like to delineate between the concept of going to space versus concentrating space applications and benefits on society and economy, which is primarily what we were focusing on here. So purely downstream. While there is an important concept of space sector, which is of course upstream, we did not go into this process with the preconceived notion that if a nation wants to embark upon, benefiting from space, that this is an important step. So to add to that, in order to really benefit from space, because every nation is different and changes so often with the economy and disasters that might happen in that country and resource management, etc. I think it is important that the government is advised on these matters by maybe an expert body or some body that's representative of all of the entities in that nation. So again, I'd hesitate from the phrase National Space Agency because it has bigger connotations, but I think that it's absolutely important that that the interests of the country, both from the commercial, private and the citizen sectors, are represented and portrayed to the government. And yeah.
I could just add to it, you ask what you could do. Everyone can do something. You have local politicians, you have local councils, you have people who probably don't know what you're doing, and just open up your doors and invite them into your workplace. Take them, show them around, give them a tour, give them a presentation, and send them outside with an idea of what space is, and then keep adding to that. Outreach isn't just about teaching kids and doing fun things with adults and young adults. It's about everybody. So, look outside, see who's around you, and invite them in.
Okay, thank you, Team Aress. I have this one question for you, and that is that as we all know that space venture is quite capital intensive. I'm right here. Okay, we
Doesn't
know.
help.
Okay, we know space venture is capital intensive. So, what is your recommendation or advice to small countries that do not have, that not very rich? Okay, what would be your recommendation? Would you still advise them to go into space when they still have to deal with food security, health, infrastructure, and things like that? Thank you.
Okay, I think there were two questions. I would like to ask I know it was one, but I think it has two parts. First of all, the venture capitals and these things, and I would like to ask this question. So, for example, in Hungary, we don't have big VCs, for example, and we have banks, of course, but there is a opportunity, I think, and disconnected to the legislation. For example, countries can realize that there is an opportunity which called crowdfunding, but the equity crowdfunding. And the whole world doesn't have good and supportive legislation about equity crowdfunding. And maybe if Hungary can do supportive legislation about equity crowdfunding, then maybe Hungary doesn't need VCs, for example, or just a few. So they don't need a very strong private sector, because the public can support the national space sector. And what was the second one? The second part, sorry. Yeah. Yes, because I think the most important thing about the space sector are the spin-offs. So there are a lot of spin-offs which are connected to education, healthcare, and other sectors. And countries should support these cross-industrial relationships. And this can be a very good reason why to invest in the space sector, because you can have a lot of spin-offs from it, and you can use these in other sectors, for example, in healthcare.
Yeah, question.
So for countries that have a lot of problem, this country can use satellite data. There's a lot of opportunities today with the free satellite data to actually help this problem, to solve this problem for the country. So yeah, some of the time is for the long term. So you invest your money now, and you invest your power now, and then in 10 years from now, you will have less poverty, and you have more food secure just because you use satellite data. So it's actually, when you use space, it's not instead of taking care of your country problem, it's actually using space in order to solve the problem. And that's what we suggest in all this project, that space is actually from humankind. It's for our benefit of all citizens of all countries.
Coming to that question again, see, one of the examples of our space application, if you see telemedicine and tele-education, is one of the biggest in all world if you take, because to reach out to such rural areas, as you address the problems of health and this is one of the best options. See, you invest in a satellite for some $1 billion, but the gain you get is for 10 years. So it is not a direct economic return what you are looking for. A specialist or a cardiologist in Delhi can communicate with a village resource health center and treat a patient there. These are very big benefits which cannot be counted by economic terms alone. It has a vast implication to the society and extends through years. So the initial investment you put in a satellite, even if you don't have a launch vehicle also, go to a place where you have a comfortable launch vehicle to launch and put your satellite. It serves the society for years. So the benefits cannot be turned. You invest one and next month you get it back. It's not like that in space applications. Thank you.
Yes, I was just going to ask just one more insight, and that is it sort of builds on an initial question from Omar about international cooperation. And I would ask perhaps the three representatives, the one from Peru, from the Philippines, and from Oman, whether in your discussions the example of ESA and how ESA, the European Space Agency, has been a catalyst for development of lesser developed countries in terms of their space capability has helped them, whether or not you envision, maybe not right away, but in some pathway forward, regional alliances within your specific regions geographically that could benefit from leveraging each other's talents amongst the nations in your area that are potentially similarly interested in their space capability.
Okay, for Oman, we have of course explored these options, and we have found that, like, for ESA has some outreach program that can help the country. That's the international level. And for the second part of the regional, it's somehow out of scope of the project because it's focus on national level. It's not about, but we already seen some examples like Japan with the Philippines, and also the ESA example, and many more.
Okay, for the Philippines, actually, when we started our satellite program, there was this one country that we went to, my agency, but what they said is that, okay, we will give you the satellite and it's yours, so we build it for you. So, but that's not what we want. We want to develop our own capability. And then, so here comes Japan, and then Japan was offering the solution that we study in Japan and then develop the satellite there, and then we will actually build the satellite with the help of Japanese professors. So that's a kind of like how we started our program. So, but for ESA, I would really love to if ESA would, and the Philippines would have a collaboration. But for now, we haven't really established it yet because we are more focused on Asian collaboration. So one example would be currently right now we have some students in Kyushu University, and then I'm not sure if you heard of the BIRDS project. It's an international collaboration project. We developed this CubeSats, and then all the students will develop their own CubeSats to be launched into space. So, and then also we have been actively participating in APRSAF, or as such Momena mentioned, which is a forum conducted by JAXA. So yeah, more of our path for space project is more of leaning towards like Asian collaborations first, but hopefully in the future for ESA or NASA would have a collaboration, and we will very much welcome it. So,
So for the case of Peru, actually in the Americas there exists this conference of the space in the Americas, the CEA. All the countries in the Americas gathers each 2 or 3 years and discuss about how to develop the space sector for the whole continent. They usually focus on education, disaster management, and those things. Also, at least for Peru, we have certain level of contact with ESA because we lately we have been using its launching facilities at the Guyana French Guyana. For example, this year we launched the PeruSat-1 satellite. We did in collaboration with ESA for launching into space. Apart from that, in the academic sector, there is a lot of collaboration between countries in Latin America. I belong to some of these institutions, and we are always in contact between Peru, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, for doing research projects, things like that in the space field.
To add to that question, actually now through the SSP course itself we understood, we started with the space race, but now it is like a global market, it is a global space. And though I told about India, about we are having our own operational launch vehicles and all, international collaboration is the path forward, because no country can venture into such independently maybe. So in case of our thing also, whenever we have a lack of capacity in our launch vehicle and we want to take a communication satellite, we approach ESA and get it done through the Ariane vehicle. So international collaboration is very much essential to get the full application of the space science. And also in our case studies and other things we are seeing, that is why we have formulated that a collaboration with international partners is necessary. And to do that effectively, definitely the space policy and this one should be formulated from the government. So the government represents the country, and it is easy to take part in the international collaboration. That is why a government space policy makes it much easier than a private run thing. Thank you.
So the various countries have their own rationales for getting to space, but do you think it is important for them to have to take an active part in international law and policy discussions, and what leverage would they have in these discussions?
Can you rephrase that question? In the international ones. Mm-hmm. On the international level, it's a bit complicated. We have the 5 space treaties, and they're quite old. And the international level, at the moment, it's very difficult to reach new conclusions concerning law. So, of course, the emerging countries should try, because we actually need to address new problems, and such as space traffic management, to make space more secure and enhance the security. But yeah, it's really difficult. The states in general don't want to agree on a binding law.
All right, with that, we'd like to pass the microphone to Rob Hale for closing remarks.
First of all, I'd like to thank the sponsors, Cork County Council, Science Foundation Ireland, Blackrock Castle Observatory, and of course, the hosts here, Cork Institute of Technology. Before I say anything about these remarkable individuals, I have to go back about a year ago. I got a phone call out of the blue from Niall Smith. Niall, you here? Is Niall in the audience? There he is at the back, wearing his honorary Aress shirt. He is the extra team member of Aress. The conversation started with, "Hey, Rob," that usually means he wants something. To then, "What are you doing next summer?" And I went, "I'm going to see the solar eclipse in the United States of America." I didn't get to see the solar eclipse in the United States of America. Over the next year, we formulated plans. Me and Niall have been working very closely together across the island of Ireland, of course, with the north being part of the UK. But we see the opportunities here to really try and grow the space sector in Ireland. It's doing really well, but there's new opportunities, that we have new space and programs. So wouldn't it be great if we got all of these wonderful people together against objectives and tasks to do something? So it came to about months before the project, and we had a teaching associate who fell out, and they weren't coming. So that's fine, that's fine. I've never done this before. I'd never been a chair. I wasn't really invested in ISU at the time. 2 weeks later, the next one, they fell out. And we're literally right up to the wire. And we're really lucky because a young man called Andrew Butler, who was our teaching associate, came on board. And he turned out to be absolutely fantastic, especially when I didn't really know what was going on. And the person with the most experience is my co-chair, Ed Chester. He wasn't arriving until August. So we got there, and in the first month we had visiting lecturers. I thought these were really good people to help inspire them, realizing that most of the folks here were taking on a subject they really didn't know much about to really try and open up, broaden their experiences of the space sector. And the first meeting I went to, what I saw was a group of individuals. Really quite quiet, guys. At that time you were quite quiet. You were listening intently. You could actually feel the heat of the brains off the door. It was incredible. And the next time I came, what I saw is people starting to have a bit of a debate. I must admit, probably like all of the other programs in here, the TPs. I remember coming in one time, and it was a heated discussion, I think is how I would actually phrase that. But people were starting to open up. It was because with different styles of learning, they were getting different experiences. People were getting more confident. They were becoming more informed in something they didn't really understand before. They could actually get into the conversation and make meaningful interjections. I was like, wow, this is cool. And over the month I was coming back and forward due to work commitments, what I started to see was groups of people getting together, seeing cultural barriers being broken down, seeing the diversity of skills really starting to come to bear. And then we started on the team project. Like all team projects, if there was a graph, it would kind of go like this. But every time we got to a deadline, it went right up there. The team excelled every time. So I'm sure I could say this about every single person in this room has been a participant, but I have to talk about the group that I know the most. You are the most remarkable, fantastic, wonderful, innovative, creative folks I've ever met. It has been an absolute privilege for me and Ed to work with you. You've done a tremendous job. I hope you go away from this with an incredible knowledge and new experiences. I hope you all stay together, because I think that's the other part of the ISU. And if you were to say to me now, am I invested in ISU and what happened here? Oh boy, I'm invested in it, and I'm invested in these people. A big round of applause, please, for Team Aress!